New book called LSD, My Problem Child.
Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting.
Albert Hoffman was the head of,
now. That's right. I called it now. I like that. Okay,
so
so what I'm doing with now, I'm going to emphasize this face that sort of appeared in these brushstrokes here. This line, that's just the cross beam of the back of the canvas, which I was going to erase. Now I'm going to utilize as the horizon line and eyes for this woman's face. It will be a pink lip right here, a light purplish cheek, and then I think her head is going to be blossoming into a tree of hair that's going to have branches that are going everywhere. And then green around from this down, from the horizon line down, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay. That's the plot for the moment.
Such a use accords entirely with the essence and working character of LSD as a sacred drug. There are so many levels to play this game at today, because there is certainly a fascinating socio-political ramification. This is 10 days short of 20-year date. I was sent a letter by Nathan Pusey saying that I was no longer the employee of Harvard. And I'm sure I have some gossip you don't know. But I'd rather share these few moments. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a while, and then Timothy's going to talk for a while, and then we'll either take a break then or we'll talk a little together, and then after intermission you'll have a chance to ask questions and we can play. And we can all play here until 2 o'clock when we get thrown out. Welcome. You okay? Nice to be with you. I gotta say that Timothy, before I get serious, that I'm in an interesting position. David and Timothy are two of my very, very profound mentors of this lifetime. And to acknowledge and honor these two beings who have taken me each in a certain deepening direction. David met me as applying for graduate school at Wesleyan when he was chairman of the department in 1952. He met me at an EPA conference and he hired me on the spot to come down to take a master's. He is my longest continuing friend at this point. I mean, in terms of people you meet along the way that you keep. He and I have been friends now since 1952. And Timothy took me by the ears, lovingly, and shook me free of a heavy, Jewish, neurotic, middle-class, closed, tight, frightened kind of psyche that was absolutely strangling me. And he just blew it all away. What more could you ask of a teacher than that? I think I'd really like to share just reflections about psychedelia, psychedelics, psychedelic chemicals, tryptamine derivatives, altered states of consciousness.
That's good.
I must say the past 20 years have been the happiest years of my life. Scary, but happy. And over these years, I've continued to depends on who you ask, honor or play with psychedelics. From 1963, when I left Harvard, I became very active in the psychedelic movement, and then went to India later. And met a guru. And the second day, somebody had told him apparently that I used LSD, and he said to me, "You use that yogi medicine?" And I said, "Yes." "You got any of it?" "Yes." So I brought out the bottle of this and that, and I put it in my palm, and I pointed out the LSD, and I gave him one, which was 300 micrograms, which was a good adult dose, if you're asking. And he said, "Come on." So I gave him 300 more. He said, "Come on." So I gave him 300 more. He took him in his hand, and he went like that. And I, as a social scientist, said, "This is going to be very interesting." And at the end of an hour, nothing had happened at all. At the end of 2 hours, nothing had happened. Now, I couldn't believe that anybody could take 900 micrograms and nothing would happen. This is truly a miracle, a power, a city. So I came back to America and I told all about this. But I had this gnawing suspicion in the back of my mind that maybe what he did was sort of hypnotize me, and he threw them over his shoulder. So, when I came back to India, I found myself in his presence after some months, and one of the things he said to me was, "Did you give me some medicine last time I was here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did I take it?" And he looked at me, and I said, "Well, I think so." And that was that dialogue. And he said, "What happened?" I said, "Nothing." He looked at me, "Joe, go away." So I went away for the night, and the next morning I came back, came up and he said, "You got any more of that medicine?" I said, "Yeah." So I brought my medicine kit and I had 5 pills left, 5 pills for 300 each. So I put one in his hand, he took 2 more, and 2 more. He took every one but the broken one. He didn't want the broken one. He took 4 sacred plants. And he held them, and then he took each one, and he opened his mouth, and stuck out his tongue. Then he said to me, "Will they make me crazy?" And I said, "Probably." And he said, "Can I take water?" I said, "Sure." So he got water, he drank water, and then he brought an old man over with a watch. He said, "How long will it take?" So I thought body weight, maximum an hour, my goodness. So I said an hour. So he held the watch, and at the end of an hour, nothing. And he says, these medicines were known about in the Kulu Valley long ago. But he said, that kind of knowledge has been lost for a long time. Been lost. So later, somebody said, is it useful? LSD? He said it could be useful. He said it could allow you to come in and have the darshan of Christ. Meaning you could come in and be in the presence of living spirit. But he said, you can't stay there. You can only stay about 2 hours, he said, and then you got to leave. He said it would be better to become the living spirit of Christ than to visit it. But he said, your medicine won't do that. He said, it's not the true samadhi. Now, I suspect, and I've taken LSD about once every 2 years since I first ingested it with Timothy. I've taken many, many more times during the first 5 or 6 years. But I don't think I've missed a 2-year period. Because I always assumed that I'm going to start from a different launching pad. Because all the things that happened to me in that 2 years put me in a different space from which to take off. Explore a new unchanneled kind of planes of reality. And then I also feel like I'm a member of an old explorers club that has a loyalty to have reunions, you know, and so let me describe one trip to you, because that'll always convey the way what's happening to me. I've been if I get too long-winded, I just we'll use each other. You know, Jeremy. I've been a student over the years of Theravadan Buddhism, which is the Pali doctrine of Buddhism. And in the Visuddhimagga, which is one of the old texts, it describes the way as your concentration deepens by doing Vipassana meditation. As your concentration gets more laser-like, and your awareness stands back from time more, you get to the point where in very deep meditation, you begin to see your own thoughts arising, existing, and passing away. Now, as Buddha pointed out, those thoughts are passing at the rate of about 1 trillion per blink of an eye. So for you to stand back far enough to see a thought come into existence, exist, and pass away, means that you've gotten your mind very far back in relation to time. Is that coming through? Can you hear us? Anybody out there? Okay, thanks. My ego needs a lot of love, so you just got to remember that. It works basically on love. The more you love it, the more you get out of it. Okay, so there's this great description of Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga is like a thing that makes Western psychology of the human mind look kind of uninteresting, because it is so sophisticated in its analysis of states of consciousness. And then it describes how, as you get to the point where the thought comes into existence, exists and passes away, between the end of that thought and the beginning of the next thought, there is a space. And if you enter that space, you are known as a stream enterer. And that is entering into what's called Nibbana, which is the field behind the form, if you will, or the field that is inherent within the form, or the field out of which the form arises. Okay, now let's shift gears. I am at the Mid-America Motel in Salina, Kansas. Okay. I have been driving across the country, and a rather secretive friend of mine has given me a bottle of LSD, which sparkles in the dark. And I am on my way to Boulder, Colorado to teach with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche at a place called Naropa Institute, where we began Naropa that summer. And so I've got a whole trunk full of Tibetan tankas that I'm delivering to Trungpa. And I've got 3 days free, so I decide room 125 of the Mid-America Motel is my ashram, my monastic cave, and I take the tankas out of the trunk and hang them over the different things. I put a picture of my guru in the middle of the television set, turn on this picture with no sound, so it's all coming out of his head. Okay. And I have different pictures around the room, and then in the floor in front of the television set, I have important questions to ask myself, like, you know, who are you? You know, things like that. take off all my clothes, I take this medicine. And I need to go to the toilet, and I figure I got 20 minutes to sort of get everything. I had candles and incense, and I pushed the beds aside. And so. Well, I was in the toilet, and it was like an elevator in the trade building. And I realized that whatever this was, it was more than I had anticipated. And that moment of fear of more than is a great one. I thought, what did he give me? Maybe I got the wrong dosage. I shouldn't trust him anyway. I began what you would call a bad trip in the technical language of this psychedelic movement. So I proceeded to go directly from the toilet to the door of the motel to call for help. Now, my mind then imagined a naked man rushing out of room 125, calling for help. Okay? I knew I was going to die, you see. I decided I was going to die, and so I figured what'll happen is they're going to call an ambulance, and then they're going to take this naked man and put him on, and it's going to be to there, and Thorazine and questions and lights, and I'm going to die anyway, and why don't I die a different way than that way? See? So I come back inside. I just had opened the door to the chain, close the door again, come back in, and I sit down in front of the television set, and I take up a picture of my guru, and I look directly. It's a very fierce one in which he's pointing, like, stop fucking around. It's like that. Okay. And he looks at me, and I say to him, Maharaji, let me die. Figure this is as good a time to go as any. And what do they find? I just imagine them finding the next day this man with all these little signs and this picture in the middle of the set, and I mean, these are the artifacts that are left from that. That's the message, and it seemed like as good a message as any. So I said, let me die, and I lay down, I cuddled into a fetus position. And my mind, I began to pull back from my mind, and I began to see my thoughts arise, exist, and fall away. And for moments you could focus on the arising of mind, and you could see how, like Christ says, I am making all things new. Look, all things are being made new. And you saw what it looked like to look and see the creation of all forms out of form. There was another moment where you just saw the kind of continuity of it all. And then there was this moment where you saw it all turning into shit. Just decaying. You saw everybody turning into skeletons. You saw everything turning into liquid. It was the one where a lot of Buddhist monks commit suicide. Because you and everything you believed in and everything turns into that. It's Shiva. It's the dance of Shiva. And then I saw this space. And so at one point, I just, not by choice, I just drifted into the space. The next thought I had that I can remember was, wow, you can be anything this time around. You're free. You can do anything. Because it became so apparent to me the way in which mind creates. And I suddenly experienced myself as the creator instead of the victim. Because as long as I identify with my creation, I'm the victim. Now, what I experienced was a break in consciousness, not like sleep and not like dream. What I experienced was a break in consciousness. And when I came back from that, I experienced that I had not come back from nothing. And I came back very, very peaceful, very fulfilled, very present, very at home, very free. Later, when talking in Bodh Gaya in India, with a meditation teacher. I merely described this experience to him. I didn't mention the LSD. And he said to me, "Oh, you are a stream enterer. You have entered nirvana." I said, "No, but you don't understand. I took LSD to do that." He said, "Doesn't matter. You are a stream enterer." And that's the way I understand that methods are methods are methods. Meditation's a method, and psychedelics are a method. Methods are all traps. A method by its nature is a trap. It has to entrap you into itself in order to eject you at the end. You just hope it self-ejects. Because I've met a lot of dry meditators. Are you enlightened? I meditate. I know, but are you enlightened? I meditate. And I've certainly met a lot of acid heads. Are you enlightened? I take acid. I know. I'm just going to tell you one story that I've just told around, because it just is such a beautiful statement of what was inherent in what happened in the 60s. I was going to go much further out in this lecture, but I guess you're not worth it or something. I'll get there. Let me tell you this one story. Oh, don't mind it. It's all right. You can handle being unloved. We love each other enough to be able to handle that. Okay, this is the thing I've told in a lot of my lectures. It's so juicy. In the late 60s, everybody that came to my lectures all looked alike. They all, in the 70s, they all smiled, wore beads, and they had, I've seen it all, I've seen the light. I'm happy, And I was sort of like an uncle. This was the godfather, and I was sort of an uncle. And I would speak on the road, and all this crowd would come, and we'd all smile at each other, and then I would say outrageous things that you only knew if you knew. And everybody would, yeah, we know. Well, there was a woman in the front row, and she was about 70. She had a little hat with oranges and cherries and things on her head. She had a black patent leather bag and responsible-looking Oxford shoes and a print dress. She looked like one of your relatives. And she was sitting there, and everything I said, she went like this. And I thought, how does she know? So I'd say something more outrageous that only real heads would know, and she'd go like this, and I thought, well, she may have a neck problem, and I'm studying. Finally, at the end of the lecture, I sort of egged her on to come over, and she came over, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much, that made perfect sense, all the things you were talking about." I said, "How do you know? What method do you use that brings you into the space where you know those things?" She leaned forward very conspiratorially and she said, "I crochet." And if I look out at my audiences these days and see the heterogeneity of the group gathered, I see that what we were a part of in the psychedelia in the early 60s and all through the late 50s and through the 60s and 70s, all of that whole process, not in itself, it's certainly television and transportation and economics and so on have all contributed, but psychedelics was one of the major forces in a shift in consciousness in this culture. And it is very, very fast becoming a massive just change in awareness, that I can say. And it's a much more heterogeneous group. It's people that come from all they crochet. And yet they know something. Something did indeed happen. There was one time in the 60s when Tim and I were working together, when I took psilocybin with Madison Presnell. Madison Presnell was a black psychiatrist. He was our doctor in residence. And Madison and I took psychedelics, and I grew up in Newton. And I was, yes, Weeks Junior High School in Newton. And see, I grew up in a middle-class Jewish ghetto, and I was trained not to have prejudice. So I didn't have any prejudice. And when I took psilocybin with Madison, I really liked Madison, we were friends, but I was still very aware the figure was still...
Alright, so that's the start of that. I don't know where it's going from here, but I like the initial image emerging there. It's kind of cool. So that's it for the moment. Oil painting now. Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico. Have a good afternoon there.
Everything was going fine.